You're struggling to score and defend in NHL 24? By the end of this video, you are going to be a better player. I'm going to go over all of my settings, as well as the strategies on offense, defense, how to break the puck out, everything that you need to know to become a better player in game. I'll have a separate video that will go over some of my more in-depth tips for squad battles, but the main focus of this video is becoming a better player online. So let's start off with the settings. Now, one of the biggest changes in potentially the last decade when it comes to actually playing the game is the new total control scheme. It's been a jarring change for a ton of the player base, moving on from the old traditional skill stick. For the players that used hybrid at the time of this video, unfortunately, you're going to have to wait just a little bit longer before the hybrid controls come back. In this video, I am going to touch on total control. The reason why is that after about 5 to 10 hours of playing the game and getting used to the total control scheme, especially for the average player, it is hands down far superior to skill stick. And again, I'm going to teach you all the annoyances and everything like that and how to deal with them. And I'm going to walk you through how to use it effectively. Now, for the controller settings, again, we're going to go with total control here. Auto backskate, please turn that off. This can cause you a massive issue when it comes to defending specifically, especially against an online opponent, because there will be instances where you do not want to have your back to your own goaltender when you are backskating. You want to have total control when defending the rush. Shooting controls, leave that as camera relative. Vibration, I personally don't understand people that have vibration on. I get it for first-person shooters, but for me, I find this game hard enough as it is. I don't need my controller just randomly shaking all over the place. I just turn it off. Online pass assist percentage. This has been one of the most talked about and tinfoil hat settings in the game. Guys, leave this at 100. I've talked to the developers a number of times when it comes to pass assist. It is what dictates how much the AI will help out with your passing when you are aiming. I promise you, just leave it at 100. On to the visual settings. Now, the main one is going to be camera. There are really only 3 options here if you are talking about strictly online gameplay. And if I'm being honest, it's really only 2. But there are a lot of players that will benefit from the classic camera. It is the most zoomed in one of the 3 I'm going to talk about. And I do think it offers some benefits when it comes to, deking and shooting, because you're at a lot closer advantage. Same with when you go to poke check and hit. You're just at a much closer perspective. But I would say it benefits more in the one-on-one. When it comes to setting up plays or defending them, it is far worse than the other 2. Overhead would be the most popular, and the reason for it is simply because it allows you to set up and see the plays in the most zoomed out way, giving you a top-down look of the game. 100% one of the best cameras you can use, simply because it gives you the best look at what's available when it comes to passing plays or defense and seeing what's being set up on you. Overhead will give you a fantastic view. However, the one I use and prefer is zone. It does everything that overhead does, giving you that zoomed out effect to see offensive and defensive plays. But the one added benefit of zone is that it will show you the neutral zone when you're in the offensive zone. And why that's important is A, to see if there's anyone behind you cheating, or B, when you're breaking the puck out and you want to drop it back because that is really the most effective play, zone will allow you to see the trailer and where they are. On overhead, you're essentially guessing. Everything else when it comes to indicators and things like that, that's all personal preference. Mess around with them all you want, but the main one that we want to talk about and highlight is simply the camera. So again, to recap, I would use zone. That's my preferred one. If it's a little too zoomed out, and I know for some people it is, the other option would be overhead. Next, I want to talk about your lineup. For anyone new to Hockey Ultimate Team, this might be a little weird, but for all of the veterans, this will be pretty quick. You want to make sure that you have opposite-handed players on your left and right wings. The reason for that is simply it sets up a one-timer in every single scenario. It also allows you to cut into the middle for some of the most effective wrist shots, so make sure that your lineup is set with left-handed players on the right wing and right-handed players on the left wing. Same thing for defense. At the point, if your defensemen are not switched and you have righties on the right and lefties on the left, they will never be in the one-time setup, meaning that your opponent can basically fade your defense from having any impact offensively. Now, you can obviously manually switch them during the play, but there's no reason for that if you can just switch them already. I'm not going to touch on abilities and synergies in this video. I'll do that in an entire separate video. On to the settings. Now, like every year since 2004, when Behind the Net, Crash the Net, and Overload were introduced in the game, yes, it has been the exact same offensive strategies for 20 years. All 3 are still viable and have their place in NHL 24. Now, after about 75 Rivals games that I've played, I've tried out Overload as well as Crash the Net and Behind the Net, and I still think that Behind the Net offers the most utility. I do like Crash the Net quite a bit more this year than prior years, simply because you were rewarded for just shooting the puck on goal so much for rebounds, because of how the full pressure meter works. When you take shots from anywhere, you'll get a large chunk of that offensive pressure. However, the issue with that is that you're giving your opponent a chance to regain possession. On top of that, crash the net is the least predictable, and I find that when you're cycling around behind the net, your winger will just kind of stay there in your way. So I've moved on. I am using behind the net again, and in this video, I'm going to show you how to effectively use the behind the net strategy. Now, when it comes to sliders, I am not going to lie. I actually don't think they do anything. I think the AI is incredibly simple, like it has been for the last 20 years. And I think that these sliders, for the most part, are meant for offline players. That said, there is one that I think does matter, but I'll walk you through why I've got mine set to why they're set up. When it comes to carry and dump, just carry the puck in across the line. No reason to have it set over to the dump side of things. Cycle and shoot. Again, for your offense, I've never noticed this to really change any sort of positioning, especially when using behind the net. But since behind the net is all about cycling, set it all the way to cycle. Efficiency and energy. I find that when it's set all the way to energy, your guys will run out of steam really quickly, and they don't really gain that much speed. And when it's set all the way to efficiency, I find that they're just not really fast as they normally are. I leave this right dead in the middle. Don't block and block. This year, as well as NHL 23, screening the goaltender matters more than it ever did. You can literally wrist a shot from the point if your goaltender is screened or their goaltender is screened. And when I'm not controlling my defenseman or the player that's getting in front of the puck, I want them to get out of the way. Setting it to don't block will make sure that they step out of the way and allow the goalie to actually see the shot. And it's completely random when they actually go down into a block animation. So again, leave this at don't block. I am someone who sets all of their lines to the exact same. The reason for that is I just don't like it making it any more complicated on myself. I think that there is a place to have lines that have different things so that you're throwing more at your opponent. And there is definitely a time to switch things up, but I'll talk about that in a little bit later on in the video. All right, so let's walk through how to use the behind the net effectively, but first I want to go over the types of goals that I look for. I think that every player has a tendency, and no matter how much or little you play the game, no matter what, when push comes to shove, you're more than likely going to go for one or two of the same kind of shots, and I'll show you why I go for the ones that I go for. In NHL 24, I have noticed a great success rate on low far side shots, not simply on just them going in, but also what they cause. Oftentimes, if it doesn't go in, it's kicked out right into the middle, and you can bang home a nice rebound. On top of that, because of the changes to the full pressure system, you get a massive bonus whenever you take shots on goal. So this will also help you activate the full pressure system. That is when behind the net really kicks into gear once you've got the full pressure meter activated. I think what separates players from just being completely average and mediocre are the ones that start to look for specific plays in the NHL video game. More often than not, everyone just stares at the player with the puck. And once you have even the slightest strategy in place, you will jump up to the next division that you're in. So for the behind the net strategy, here is what you're looking for every time that you get full zone control. The forward you're using with the puck will rotate behind the net. Your two other forwards will essentially follow in almost like a triangle shape. One will go follow you behind the net, the other will slide out in front into the slot. Now, what you do once you have cycled around the net, that's going to depend on your opponent. However, this is the basics of this formation. You can do this as many times in one cycle until your opponent starts to actually adjust for it. Now, what I want to teach you when it comes to the behind the net strategy are the things that you can look for quickly that you can start to react upon without thinking. So we're going to use this rush as an example. All right, so when you gain zone entry, you don't want to always just take the player with the puck across the blue line and go right for behind the net. That's very easy to defend with even the most casual of players. So you've got to make sure that the play is open to actually set up the behind the net. So in this instance right here, he's manually defending me, and I notice that my triangle player is now beginning to skate behind the net, while his defender out in front is staying right in front of the net, meaning that I know I can fire this around the boards and get it behind the net. This is the most important part about setting up behind the net, because you will find instances in which that defender does not stay in front of the goaltender and will actually be able to get to the pass first that goes behind the net, meaning that you've just turned the puck over. If you're going to send it behind the net, make sure that your player is actually moving and going to get to that puck first. So your first read should be that far side winger. Here's another example of what to quickly look for when you've set up the behind the net. Once their CPU is no longer in position and you find one of your players open, you need to do everything you can to get it to them by cycling around the net. In this instance, Orlov is way up in the play. He's manually taken his defender way out of position, and we get a great opportunity in front. But more often than not, this is the play you're looking for. You're getting manually defended, they get a little too aggressive, you're able to hold the puck off, get into the middle, and you shoot low far side. Having anyone with gold close quarters or a high 80s shot, especially at launch of the game, is going to make this more successful, but this is the hardest play to defend for the average player when you're cycling the puck so much because they get very impatient, and this is what you're looking for. And I want to make sure everyone understands this is not an automatic goal. It is just the one that I have found that players give up the most in terms of positioning and has a shot to cause the most havoc. Like I mentioned earlier, it will go in, but if you've got your far side winger in position with the behind the net strategy, they can simply hammer home the rebound like in this sequence here. Again, when setting up the behind the net, your first read should always be that far side winger. Now, there is an interesting option available to you if your winger is on his forehand. If you are able to cycle around behind the net and your winger stays on his forehand, the option to quickly snap it home from a pass behind the net is going to be available to you. Now, this isn't always going to be the case because sometimes they will cycle out in front. But if you pay attention to that first read, you can see if they are going to head behind the net or stay right on the bar. If they are right on the bar, you can usually fire this thing home. The last thing I want to touch on is that when you're coming out from the corner and you notice that your opponent is manually defending that backdoor player, EA still does not allow manual players to actually make intercept animations. What I mean by that is close the skates or move your stick into the way like they did in NHL 22. So unfortunately, it's why you see so many cross-ice plays go through. Now, when it comes to defensive pairing, this is where I have noticed the sliders actually do something. Hold the line and pinch. I think this might matter a little bit more depending on if you spend money in the game or you have a God Squad. If you are someone like me who's free to play, I set it to hold the line because I want the least amount of 2-on-1s and breakaways that I can possibly have. Setting it to hold the line will make sure that your AI defenseman will not jump up along the boards. And while it can cause some turnovers on the forecheck, I think there's just safer ways to do it. When it comes to cycle and shoot, I've noticed that when you do set your defenseman to cycle, they will jump up from the point and go into the high slot. And the problem with that is usually there's a centerman or an AI player there, and it just kind of eliminates them from being a pass target. Leaving it at shoot has them stay all the way at the point so that you can set up one-timers. I do the same thing again for all of my lines. So here is an example of that. I work the puck back to Orlov at the point, and you'll notice that Makar starts to skate into the high slot, but then he stops to come back to the point. I've noticed that when you have it on cycle, you'll see that defender go all the way up into the play. And more often than not, that will just wipe him out as an available option. So I like having my defenseman stay back at the blue line. I also want to talk quickly here about how to effectively do tip shots. Now, if you are not very good at using the L2 and back skating, I want to be clear, this is probably going to go rough for you the first few times that you try it because you can turn the puck over for a breakaway. That being said, if you want to have the most effective shot at scoring a tip shot, you have to set it up correctly. Just blindly firing it towards the net is nonsense. So what you want to do in this play here is you back skate just a little bit to get your forward that is in front of the net to look at you. Once he looks at you, you want to fire towards the side of his stick. I like to fire it lower because I found that when it gets tipped up into the net, it has more success than when it gets tipped down. Also, the ability seeing eye, when the goalie is screened, will freeze them just a little bit, but for people that don't like to utilize the point at all, it's really not going to be all that beneficial to you. On to team strategies. This is going to change depending on your opponent, but this is what I start out as. The 1-2-2 aggressive. This game rewards you being aggressive more than any other NHL game because if you are able to turn the puck over and get it back, you will get a large portion of the full pressure bar to fill. In the past, I've really liked 1-2-2 passive because you will get players that just force passes out of the zone and you can manually control the one and just cause turnovers that way. However, the issue with 1-2-2 passive is that if you have the full pressure meter activated and they regain possession of the puck, you're essentially allowing them to just clear it because you back out of the zone. Weak side lock in the 2-3. The reason why I'm not a big fan of them in this game is because I have noticed that when you have a second player up jumping up on the forecheck, that it's caused a lot of 2-on-1s and breakaways because the other three players kind of get all mashed up and jumbled up in the neutral zone. So that's why I leave it at 1-2-2 aggressive. The neutral zone. I usually hate the 1-4. And again, you will change this depending on the type of player that you are playing. If you are playing someone that just carries the puck and does not pass it through the neutral zone, you want to be using the 1-4. And for the most part, you want to use the 1-4, not because you want to set up a trap along the blue line, but because I've noticed that the 1-2-2, whether it be red or blue, and the 1-3-1, it'll have the defensemen separate too much, and again, allows you to just get beeline right up the middle. With the 1-4, I at least can control in the neutral zone that middle part of the ice. I'd much rather have an opponent beat me along the boards than straight up the middle, so that's why I have it set as the 1-4. And as you can see, I actually have my trap forecheck set to a little bit more forecheck bias, and I know that sounds counterintuitive within the neutral zone, but that's once they get the puck across the blue line. When it comes to your actual forecheck, that's the 1-2-2 aggressive. I like having this a little bit more to the aggressive side. And again, like I mentioned, the 1-4 is great for playing against players that carry the puck into the zone. The 1-2-2 red is what you want to use if an opponent is passing a ton through the neutral zone. Now, when it comes to defending the neutral zone during the rush, I find way too many people in NHL 24 are going to try and get a big hit along the boards or pressuring that player. Because not everyone is used to how to actually hit effectively in this game, you're just completely missing your opponent. What I would recommend is when you are defending the rush, leave your defenseman to defend the blue line, but take your forward and instead of pressuring that player, sit in the middle. This is again the first read. This is not going to work every time. But when you are playing players in lower divisions, they are only making one read. So if you can take away that first read, and your AI comes and takes out your opponent, you can get the puck back pretty easily. So again, what I would recommend is taking your forward, try to make it your centerman, and have him just patrol the middle of the ice during a rush. Defensive pressure. What this dictates is how aggressive or passive your players will be in the defensive zone. In past years, protect net and collapsing has been the best, simply because you just clog up in front of the net, and they really can't do anything on the outsides. While I do think this has some effectiveness, again, the issue with the full pressure bar means that if you go full collapsing protect net, you're essentially allowing your opponent to just sit there and get the full pressure meter activated. However, the issue with high pressure is that it can leave your players out of position and they can cut right in through the middle of the ice. Normal is what I've used so far this year, and it's been the most effective, and playing manual defense has never been more important. The defensive strategy, collapsing protect net and tight point. If you are playing someone that is just pumping you with shots from the point, that is the only sequence in which you want to use tight point. Now, staggered and collapsing, there are arguments for both of them. I prefer collapsing, and the reason for that is simply because it has been the strategy in which I've noticed both the left and right D will always sit right on the bar. And why that's important is because it helps defend the far side post play, as well as the Michigan. But if you are not controlling your defenseman, the AI will literally sit on the bar, basically nullifying any Michigan attempt. So if you're in the lower divisions, what I've noticed is that that's where a lot of the Michigans are being scored. At the high end in Division 2 and 1, I myself have scored like 5, and I consider myself pretty good when it comes to the timing of using the one-button Michigan. Not that there's much skill to it. And I've never had it scored on me. So take that for what it's worth. Offensive strategy. Now, offensive pressure, this dictates the rush, which is, again, a little misleading. So offensive pressure, if you have it set to full-out attack, it means that your AI defenseman, when you are breaking the puck up, will jump up right through the neutral zone. And while that can help, what I find is that they're just being way too aggressive. And if you turn the puck over, whether it be right inside the blue line or in the neutral zone, that's a GG. If you have it set to defend lead, I noticed that if someone's using the trap or collapsing really hard in the neutral zone, you really don't have a lot of passing options because your defensemen and your players won't be jumping up in the play, and that includes your forward. It'll feel like they're just not going. I leave this set at standard because it makes sure that my defensemen are playing somewhat safe and your offensemen are actually moving. Now, the control breakout. This matters very little simply because very few people actually know how to activate it correctly. To get the control breakout to actually work, you have to sit behind the net with the player you want to break the puck out with for about 2 to 3 seconds. That is what will actually have them initiate the control breakout. Now, strong side slant is probably the easiest and most effective, but really the one that you want to pay attention to is the quick breakout. Now, leave zone early, close support, and stay wide all have different benefits. However, I would choose between leave zone early and close support, and this is going to depend on your opponent. If you notice your opponent is extremely aggressive and they are attacking you using the 2-3 or just straight up always in your face, please use the close support. Again, this breakout is going to be the second you get the puck in the defensive zone. Close support will make sure that there is a weak side winger. The weak side is the side that the puck is not on. Will be in the middle of the ice along with your centerman to give you an outlet pass. That's going to be your first read. If that's taken away and you're getting attacked heavily, you should be able to break the puck up the boards, whatever side you're on. Now, if they're being passive, leave zone early can catch them off guard, because if they turn the puck over, you can fire the puck all the way around the other side of the boards, and you can sometimes catch them for a breakaway again. But again, that's going to depend on the opponent you're playing. So much like in the offensive zone when you were trying to make your first read when setting up leave zone early should just be your far side winger around the boards. If he is not covered or there is not a manual player defending it, you can simply shoot it up the boards rather than pass. This is why the send it X Factor ability is completely pointless, because in this situation, you always want to shoot. As long as you aim at your player, they will receive it. Now, when it comes to the power play, as well as some more advanced things on offense and defense, I'm going to say that for a separate video. This is a ton of info for anyone that does not know how to implement any strategy into their gameplay, and I'd love to get your feedback on if this helps, if there's anything else you want to see specifically, and then I will make some more advanced videos for you guys. Let me know what you think in the comments section down below. I hope this helps you start dominating online, and I'll see you next time. Have a good one.